Like the whole front wall could have just went in. We had a few people ask us about the permitting process, and at least the process that we followed for permitting when it comes to raw land. So I thought I would go ahead and just make a video to share with you what the process looked like for us, the steps that we took, and yeah, just go through it like that. But just to note that the process that we took is for our county. However, for the most part, it translates to other counties. And when it comes to building everything, it doesn't matter usually where you're building, it's all going to follow the IRC, which is the International Residential Code for building. So just know that anything that you build does need to meet those guidelines. Now, there is an exception to that, and that exception is only for Cochise County, where if you have 4 or more acres, you can do the opt-out, which there's a bunch of stuff that goes into the opt-out. There's more people who are familiar with that, where you can probably go find their videos to go and watch on the opt-out. But the opt-out gives you more freedom. However, it also does come with some other things that you don't have to deal with when you get the permitting. So the first thing that we did in this entire process is, before you even buy your land, you probably want to make sure that you look at codes, look at what's allowed, what's not allowed. One of the major reasons for that is because when there's very few places, especially in Arizona, there are 0 places in Arizona where you can live in your RV on your land full time. It's just not something that's done. I don't know why. If you have more land that's like further out there away from society, a lot of people can get away with it. But just know that if you're going to be buying land in Arizona, you cannot live in your RV permanently. You can only be in there temporarily while you have an active building permit to build your residential structure. So that is one thing to note. So if you are planning on an RV or planning on living in an RV, either go out to the middle of nowhere where no one can find you, or I would say don't look in Arizona. So you have to have either some type of tiny house, some type of house that you're going to build, shed to home, something that you are going to be building, and then they will go ahead and give you an RV permit, and then you just renew that permit along with your house permit until you complete your house. And then once you complete your house, and that's a different story, you can have an RV on there, and yeah. So after we found the land, it took us a very long time to find our blueprints, but once we did find our blueprints, you could either do it yourself. We thought it was going to be a lot harder to do it ourselves. And so originally, before we submitted our plans, we were looking into, it's like I'll put the name of it if I remember what they're called, but they will basically prepare everything for you. They'll dig through your blueprints and submit everything on behalf of you. So we were going to do that because at first glance, when you go to submit your building permit, they give you an entire checklist. And so the checklist is basically an intake checklist, and it's every single thing that you need to submit for them to review for you to build. And so when you first look at the list is very daunting. It's very matter of fact. And so it took me a little bit to get the courage to start pulling stuff out of the blueprints. Now, with the blueprints, you can either draw up the blueprints yourself if you are good with building codes. You can buy them online through, like, there's a bunch of websites online where they sell blueprints. We ended up going through Etsy to get our house blueprints. Now, there are some things that you have to be wary of. I'll go into our blueprints later, but when you buy them online from just, people, they're making them generic. So they are generic to pass IRC, which is the International Residential Code. They're making them to pass that bare minimum. However, your county might have some other specifications. If you are in a flooded area that floods, you'll need modification for your foundation. If you are in a high wind tornado area or hurricane area, you might need extra ties and straps and bracing. So all those plans online will just be the bare necessity that could literally pass anywhere with some modifications to the county that you're in. So you can also hire an architect as well to go ahead and build out your plans. Your architect will already be familiar with whatever county you're building in, so that is also a route that you could go. So Elijah and I actually, as like I said earlier, we decided to get our plans off of Etsy. We were looking at another plan on this other site, but the plans themselves were going to be about, I think, about $900 just for the house plans. And so we ended up going over to Etsy. And so that's where we ended up finding our house plans. We went through a bunch of different sellers, a bunch of different builders, and kind of tried to look at them, looked at the reviews. And like I said, it's one of those things where you can do as much research, but until you actually get your hands on the plans and make sure that everything was in there. A lot of the sites that we found, the sellers on there, they were good about telling you what exactly was in the plans, because I do know that we've came across some plans where they didn't have the electrical in there, they didn't have the plumbing in there, they didn't have the water line. So that was all stuff that you would have to draw up yourself. And so just make sure that you go through the detailed list. They do give you a checklist of everything that's on there. The plans that we ended up finding, they also gave us a material list when we bought it, so that we can just go through, and it broke up the material list that this is everything that you need for the foundation, this is everything for framing, and so on, so that we at least know, we can calculate, the building prices and everything for how much it's going to cost us to build. Back to the permitting, so back to the submitting the permit. So when we submitted the permit, you calculate. The way that they do it down here is that you take your square footage. So ours is 884 square feet, the house size. They take the square footage and then they have a base number. So they have different tiers. So, if your house is between this and this amount of square footage, this is how much you'll pay per square foot. And then if you go, this is the baseline for how much you'll pay for the permit. And then every square foot that you go over that, it's going to be $9 every square foot over that. And then they do also charge for porches. So even though our house is 884 square feet, we have an additional almost 400 feet in just porch space for the front and back porch. And so the porch space you also pay for. However, it's at a cheaper rate than the actual heated space. So that's one thing to note. So they calculated that up and gave us the total for how much it would cost us to get our building permit, which is a one-time fee. And then that covers inspections and covers everything else. So when you're on the intake checklist, what they want you to do is they want you to ensure that all your blueprints have everything that's on that list. And so everything has to be submitted at the same time. And so, for example, if you had your plans drawn up for somebody or you drew them up, you already know you can just submit your blueprints in full. However, since we bought ours online, ours had 3 separate foundation options. I had to go in and pull different stuff out of the blueprints to submit there. And so once I pulled all that stuff out, we got it submitted, and then off it went. They went through our blueprints and they checked to make sure we had, the requirements, at least the bare minimum requirements that they needed for us to push it on to the next phase. After we submitted that, it then went off to developmental services. And so that is where we got stuck the longest. I say longest, but it was really only like a week and a half, maybe a week. But that's the engineer or architect for the county. And so they actually run through your plans and make sure that everything is up to international, to make sure everything is up to code with your blueprints. And so once Elijah and I had submitted that, I'm the person that submits all the documents and take care of that. Elijah's more of the contact person. So like if anything's wrong or if, anything needs to be changed, they contact him and then he just tells me what we need to do, because me contacting people, that's. We went ahead and submitted that. It went off to him, and I don't know, I think it was maybe like 2 days later, maybe. He had sent Elijah an email saying, hey, can't approve your plans because of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And he sent us a little checklist of 6 things that he needed in order to move forward the process, which some of the stuff was my fault because I forgot to add it in. Some of the stuff ended up being another error that we'll talk about in a little bit. And so the first thing that he had mentioned, it was also, I think it was 1 and number 2 that he had sent. It was the same thing. He was telling us that our roof ridge beam didn't meet code because of structural. So we'll get into that we'll get into that later because we weren't using a ridge beam, we were using a ridge board, so I wasn't sure if there was confusion there, but we ended up figuring out why he had said that instead of the other one. And so number 2 was the HVAC. I did not submit the HVAC plans, which you have to submit those with your building plans. And so Elijah and I were still in the discussing phases of what HVAC plan we wanted to do, if we wanted to do ducted, non-ducted, mini splits, traditional, all that kind of stuff, and trying to figure out what was the best for that square footage. And so at the time that we submitted, we weren't sure yet, and we were like, oh, we'll just figure it out later. But no, he needed that. So we kind of quickly did a bunch of research, and so we ended up finding our HVAC system. And then it was super easy. Like I just took the floor plans and I just took some colored boxes on the computer and I just put where they're going to be. We're going to do ductless mini splits inside the house. So that made it easier because we don't have to run any ducting, which is great because the front half of our house is a cathedral ceiling. So we don't have to worry about doing any duct work on the interior. So I went ahead and got that submitted. And then the next thing that we ended up needing was the bathroom. So the plans did not have, it had the size of the bathroom, but it didn't have the spacing for the bathroom. And the way that the plans are, everything's kind of just crammed into the blueprint. And apparently there is a building code that requires your sink to be not the size of it, but the space for the sink. Even if your sink is smaller, it needs a minimum of 30 inches from end to end before you can put anything else next to that sink. Same thing with the toilet, 30 inches side to side. And then the shower or bathtub cannot be smaller, anything smaller than 25 inches. You won't want anything smaller because 25 inches is already small. So I had to go in and just make notations on there that, that it met that specifications, which was fine. The next thing was he had a question about gas appliances because we didn't have any gas lines drawn onto a blueprint, which we're not doing any gas lines. We're going to just run everything off of electric. And so so that was just a simple fix, just saying, hey. And then the next part, for some reason, when I did the floor plan, it had like the little cutout for the little roof access point. And for some reason in my head, I knew what it was for, like, hello, but I didn't make the notation. I didn't make the notation on the other end. And so what I needed to do was to, one, resubmit the plan, which I completely missed the whole page, resubmit that page to show that it was an attic access point. I also needed to put on there how you were going to access the attic, so a pull down ladder, and then also let them know what that space is going to be used for. Like, is it living space? Is it storage? Like, what is that space going to be used for? So we got that sent in and taken care of. Was there another thing, Elijah? Was there another thing?
What? There's the attic, gas,
AC,
yeah,
and roof.
Yeah.
In the bathroom, yeah. So based on all those points I just mentioned, that was all 6 of the things. So a lot of those were just quick to check off. Like as soon as Elijah sent me the checklist that he had emailed to us, which, by the way, the person that was viewing all the plans was great. Like, he was very concise and clear, and he literally told us everything that we needed, anything that we were missing, and it was just a nice, seamless process. Like, when we submitted our plans, we honestly thought, just, out of thinking worst case scenario, we honestly thought that we were going to get dinged on so much more stuff, but the fact that it was just like cosmetic stuff or like little type stuff was, it was great. And so based off of the roof, we had emailed him back and we had mentioned, we're not doing a ridge board, we're doing a ridge beam. If you guys don't know and you are building, make sure you know the difference between a ridge board and a ridge beam, because I knew that our house was a ridge board. However, I didn't truly know the difference between a ridge board and a ridge beam. And there's a major difference. So I'll let you know. So with the ridge beam roof, the roof is a structural part of the house. Like, the weight of the roof, I guess that's the best way I can explain it. The weight of the roof needs to be supported by some type of posts and beams. So the weight of the roof goes all the way down to the foundation. And so with a ridge board, there's basically no structural components to the roof. The walls are the structural components. So with a ridge board, you still have your rafters and everything. However, the weight of the roof is sitting on the edges of the house. So the roof goes like this. So all your weight is over here, and then all your weight is also over here. And so you use like extra straps, and you use ties and all that. He used extra straps, ties, and all that to help support it. And so once I started getting into more research, and he had emailed us back, and he's like, oh, okay, that's fine that you're using a ridge board. However, because the front of our house was a cathedral, whoever drew up the plans stopped the ceiling joist halfway through the house. So where the front half of the house didn't have any ceiling joists, so it was just completely floating. And so the issue with that is that our straps that were on the exterior walls will keep the house from buckling out and pushing out the walls out, like the weight of the roof. However, the ceiling joists are supposed to keep the house from like folding in. And so the back was fine when it folded in, but since there was no ceiling joist on the front of the house, like the whole front wall could have just went in. So if like with any type of wind speed. So he just told us, he suggests that we just change the roof to a ridge beam and just add some structural posts in there. But me and Elijah were talking about it because our walls are already reinforced to carry the ridge board roof. And so redoing that, then we would either be wasting material or we would have to redesign the walls ourselves, which that was not going to happen. So we did a lot more research, and we figured out, we looked at international code, whatever, and we had looked into what basically makes up a ridge board roof. Like, what are the structural components that makes it okay? And so the two things that we came across were the ceiling joist, continuous ceiling joist, by the way. So from the front of the roof to the back of the roof, a continuous joist, whether that's two, overlapping, or one big, huge beam. The second thing what were those things at the top? Collar ties? Yeah. And the second thing was collar ties being at the top on the rafters. And so we were racking our brain because our first initial thought was to just recontact the person who made the plans and be like, hey, your house doesn't meet any codes. Your roof doesn't meet codes. And so we did contact the seller. As of right now, we never got an answer back. But the same day that I contacted the seller, we were trying to find a solution ourselves. After doing a bunch of research, we were able to figure out that ceiling joists and collar ties were going to be our best friends when it came to this plan. So we basically just duplicated the ceiling joist on the back and just duplicated on the front. We're still going to have our cathedral ceiling. However, we are going to have, what are they called? Exposed. We're going to have exposed ceiling joists, which I think is going to add a lot of character to the house. And so we're just going to overlap our two ceiling joists about 4 inches or more, and then they'll just run the span of the thing. But on the front side of the house, you'll be able to see the ceiling joist, and then you'll have to also be able to see like the giant cathedral ceiling with the rafters up there as well. And so and then also to help meet code, I had looked it up, is that anytime you have, because my biggest question was, can you have exposed ceiling joists? And if you do have exposed ceiling joists, how do you make sure that it's code? Like, what do you need to do? And so when I looked it up, based on code, is that anytime you have ceiling joists, they're supposed to be, I guess, fireproof type thing. So usually to fireproof a ceiling joist, because when a fire hits the joist, it accelerates the fire faster. So usually you put drywall over that, and that helps slow the fire. Well, ours are exposed. So when I looked it up, you can just go ahead and you can put a fire retardant on the ceiling joist, and then that will make it basically fireproof. So that checked off the ceiling joist, the issue of the roof buckling. And then we also are going to have to install collar ties that we ended up. So we modified the plans ourselves, and I just made all the different notations and resubmitted it to him. So we're going to be having collar ties every third rafter, because based on our roof span, it's about 34 feet. We need a collar tie for every third rafter, and then one at the very end and one at the very beginning. So we made those changes and then reshot it back off to him, and he was like, great, your roof now meets code. So that was one hiccup that we ran into, where we were like scrambling our brains and freaking out, because, you know, when you think of like all the other stuff that we had to do that we had to resubmit, it's like one of those simple things where you're just like, okay, this is check off. But then when he's like, your roof is not structurally sound, like it can collapse, you're kind of like, oh man, like, what do I do about that? But it's like one of those things where if you do enough research, you can fix a lot of the problems yourself. So I'm glad that we were able to fix our roof ourselves. And I told Elijah, I was like, okay, we might not be able to say that we designed and built our own house plans, but now we can say that we did design our own roof. So that's one of the things where that was one of the major obstacles that we had. So just make sure when you are submitting your permits and everything, just make sure that you have all the required documents, and just, you know, don't be afraid, because the county is nice and they will help you. They will help guide you in the direction that you need, because you have to put it like this. The county wants you to build, because when you build, they get money. When you have a house on raw land, your taxes increase and they get money. So they are going to help you. They want you to build because it benefits them. That's more money that goes to the county, more money that goes to, you know, fire departments and schools and roads and everything like that. So it's in their best interest for people to move to raw land and to build on it. So they're not gatekeepers. They're not, you know, difficult. They might not know everything, but so far they've been very helpful with us. And I had mentioned before that 95% of our homesteading plans had changed because of county regulations. And so one of the biggest things that we ran into is that if you're new here, we do have 2 separate parcels that we basically just fence in like they're one. And so we have our septic on one parcel, and on the other parcel, we were going to start building our house on. And so when we first initially had submitted our blueprints, the county had called and said, hey, you can't cross your septic line to another parcel, even though we own both of them. And so it's just one of those things where, so they had suggested to us to merge our parcels, which we're not ready to merge our parcels. We will in the future, but at this point we're not ready to merge. And one of the big reasons is that if we merge, we would have to build the big house first, which means we're going to be in the RV longer, which we want to get out of the RV as soon as possible and build a smaller house. So that was one of the caveats of us not wanting to merge whatsoever. And so that kind of threw us through a doozy, and we were like, well, what do? We were like, do we just get the other side perked that we're going to put the house on, and then just, you know, get a new system put on that side? Or do we just revise this one? Or like, what would be in best interest and cost us, you know, the best amount of money? And so once we sat down and talked about it, we were like, let's just flip everything. You know, we'll build a small house on this side with the septic. We'll build the big house later and worry about that later, and, you know, get it on its own system, septic system and all that kind of stuff. So that was one of the things where it was a major setback for us, where we had to go and actually redo everything. But back to the permitting process. So with the permitting process, so in this whole time frame of us going back and forth with the county guy and trying to figure out what we needed to be code compliant and us doing research and all that stuff, it doesn't stop the permit process. Like, it doesn't freeze it right there. They won't issue it until that is approved, but it will still go off, because it has to shoot off to environmental health and services. They also shoot it off to the floodplain review, so that the county goes and checks to make sure that you are not building in a floodplain. And if you are, you have to get a permit to build in the floodplain, because you have to meet certain requirements to build there. And then it goes off to addressing. And so before our permit even got approved, we got issued an address. So it went off to environmental services, the floodplain review. They all submitted it on different days because they're different departments. And then we got our address, which was exciting, because once we're actually in the system, I don't know how long it takes for us to get in the system, like for like commercial stuff like Lowe's and Home Depot and Amazon and all that kind of stuff. But once we get in the system, we can start getting supplies delivered, which is great. So we have our address and we love it. It's a beautiful little little address that's already memorized because it's exciting because this is our forever address. And so after we fixed all the issues with the blueprints, the county person basically compiles everything she submitted, all your blueprints. He'll go on there and he will make like little notations for you to remember stuff. So like on our floor plan, on our electrical plan, he put like little circles and put SD in there to make sure that we remember to put smoke detectors in there and exactly where he wants smoke detectors to go. So one in each room and then one in the living room kitchen area at the highest point. So making sure we do like little stuff like that. And then like for our ceiling joist, code says that they have to be a minimum of 3-inch overlap. We were going to do 4, but he said that if you get longer joists and you just happen to have longer joists, rather than cutting them down, overlap as much as possible. So it's not required. They're not going to ding us and be like, hey, you only have 4 or 3, but he's just saying, you know, if you have the extra wood, overlap more if you could, because the more the better. But yeah, so pretty much he'll compile everything, he'll make his little notes, and then those are the plans that you'll build off of, those final ones with his notations, and then those are also the plans that when they come in and do inspections that they'll be reviewing and looking at. And so also on the county website, once everything's approved, there's like a little button there that shows to request inspection. And so you can literally just request inspections, and they do like same day inspections, next day inspections. So it's not like you're sitting there waiting forever. And so one of the things also, before I end the video, one thing to note, which we did not know, is that in order to have power brought to raw land, you have to have a building permit, an active building permit, which we did not know. So we got everything set up for electric. However, we couldn't get anything, ran. We can get the box set up. They can run the line, but they won't put the meter on there until your active blueprint. So this whole entire time we've been running off of solar panels, which I'll have to show you the solar panel setup in, a future thing, but just temporarily. And then we'll probably move the solar somewhere else to power something else. But yeah, so that is basically what the permitting process looks like. I think the biggest thing is just make sure that you know your county's requirements, and also just know your area too, because some areas have high wind. Out here, I think the smallest roof pitch you can have is a 212. Ours is a 812, but that's because of snow load. So like different stuff has different requirements. And so you just want to make sure that you are building up to code and just following the permit process, because it's a nice, smooth, easy process, and you will sleep easier at night if you are following the permit process. There's a lot of good information online as well. And then if you just have questions, just know you can always call the county, because that's what they're there for. They're there to help, and get money. So, but yeah, I guess if you guys have any other questions about permitting process, or if you would like to, I guess, know any more about that, you can just leave a comment down below of like what more stuff you would want to know. I think right now, Elijah and I, we're not going to plan on breaking ground anytime this year. We'll probably start breaking ground maybe January, February is our time frame that we want to break ground at, because that will put us a few months into our permit. And so we have to make sure we're making progress with the permit as well. But we just, right now, our main focus is, one, to get to the holiday season, enjoy the land, enjoy the holiday season, enjoy the kids, and then also to study the house plans, because we are in go mode. We have the green light. We have our address, we have the green light, and we can literally, if I wanted to go dig a hole and start the foundation tomorrow, we can go dig a hole and start a foundation, which is crazy. It's still like mind-boggling for us to know that we have our building permit and everything, because it seemed like it was something that was so far away, and now we're here and we're preparing to break ground. It's such a weird feeling. And so it's just a weird feeling. It's exciting, weird feeling, and we're excited to document all this and then share with you guys when we break ground and start building, because we're going to be in this building process for the long run. It's going to take us a while, but we will most definitely get it done. But yeah, so I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Don't forget to leave us a comment down below, and if you're not subscribed, make sure you subscribe. And then also don't forget to hit the notification bell so that you are notified every time we post, so you don't miss anything. So with that being said, I will see you in the next video. Bye.